Hey guys, my name is Emma and today the top 8 series continues, this time talking about audiobooks and non-fiction. So I didn't actually have enough audiobooks and non-fiction to make a full top 8 for each, so instead what I've decided to do is combine them and do a top 4. If you are here specifically for non-fiction, then I'll leave a timestamp down below about where you can jump to see that one, because I am going to be starting with audiobooks first. Now I have already mentioned quite a few audiobooks in my top 8 standalones and in series, so these are my top 4 that I've not mentioned yet, but do consider anything that I said I listened to on audiobook in the previous videos to clearly be a favourite. What I wanted to do with this video is really pull out the ones I think were improved and enhanced by the audiobook format specifically, rather than just a really good story. First one I want to talk about is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silver. BookTube has been into Adam Silver for quite a while, and this particular book was making some serious waves, I think last year more than this year. They Both Die at the End tells the story of two boys, Rufus and Matteo, and they live in a society where it's kind of speculative fiction, where basically the day that you die you get a phone call at midnight saying that you will die within the next 24 hours. It's not gone into about exactly how this works, just Adam's using this more as a jumping off point to then explore the relationship between Rufus and Matteo. It's a wonderful character study more than anything else. Now the audiobook specifically I think is wonderful because the two different voices they have for Rufus and Matteo, it's a full cast. The two different voices are just so good at capturing the essence of the character. The book is brilliant anyway, but I really liked the audiobook. My next book I want to talk about is Echo by Pam Ryan. Now this is a middle grade book which is essentially 3 separate stories that sort of tie themselves up at the end. The main thrust of these stories is it is focused on music, and specifically a harmonica that finds its way to each of the main characters from the 3 different stories, which is kind of your line through to link them all together. This harmonica is special in various different ways which I won't go into, but one of the reasons why I really loved the audiobook is each character has a song that they then end up playing on the harmonica, which is very important to them and important to their narrative. And as you can imagine, in audiobook form, you get to actually hear those songs. So I'm sure written down this is just as lovely and pretty a book, but the addition of the actual music being played on the harmonica as the backing track to this was just perfect. The next one I want to talk about is actually a mini collection, but I think I'm probably going to focus on just the first book. So Audible has released the Monster Collection, which is Dr. Jekyll, Frankenstein and Dracula all in one big compendium, which you can get for just 1 credit. Look at that deal. I am slowly working my way through Dracula. I finished off Dr. Jekyll and Frankenstein last year, and I think the narration for all of these is amazing. I am going to kind of go for a bit more of a sweeping generalization here by saying that I think that audiobooks are a brilliant way of getting into classics if you are struggling. I also listened to The Count of Monte Cristo on audiobook 2018, and it very nearly made the list. It's just a brilliant way of bringing what can potentially be a little bit of a dry story, especially if you're not used to the writing style of the time period or any of the colloquialisms and the really time period specific details that can make you feel a bit like a fish out of water. The audiobook can bring everything to life and really lift stories that you would otherwise struggle with. I think Dr. Jekyll is probably the best example of this. It's narrated by Richard Armitage, who played Thorin in The Hobbit and just has the most wonderful voice ever. And his differentiation for the different characters is beautiful. It's just stunning. And the final one I wanted to talk about is Toil and Trouble, which is a short story collection which was edited by Tess Sharpwood. I think I'll link everything down below for the specific narrators and everything, because that's a lot of names going on. This I read as the buddy read for Spookathon, and it's just a collection of 15 short stories about young women and witchcraft. And again, the thing that I thought was so strong about this was the narrator. Now the short story collection was good fun. Some of them were more interesting than others. As with any kind of short story collection, not all of them are going to resonate, and a few of them got a little bit samey. But one thing I did find that made it much stronger for me in terms of differentiating the different stories and really building like an emotional connection with the characters in a short space of time was the narration. There are a lot of different ethnicities in this book, and again the narrator does a very good job of capturing accents in a really realistic and authentic way. I do just want to do a quick honourable mention for the Themis Files. I talked about them yesterday in my top 8 series video, but they are one that I think I definitely benefit from the audiobook format, because the entire trilogy is done in like interviews and reports, and it's all very naturally suited to the spoken word. So I would really recommend that if you are going to read that one, get the audiobook, because I do think it just brings something more to the table. Okay, that was audiobooks. Let's move on to non-fiction. Book number 1 is This Is Gonna Hurt by Adam Kay. This is the diary of a junior doctor. Adam Kay was a junior doctor in the NHS. It is set in the UK, so it's looking at our healthcare system and how it works currently. The NHS is always under a lot of pressure to deliver a better service with basically less and less resources. So this was a really interesting look at what it actually means to be a doctor and what it means to have all of that pressure on you. Adam Kay is no longer actually in the medical profession. He basically left, and this book details his reasons why. One thing I loved about this is it literally is his diary going through. So whilst they have gone back and kind of edited the odd bit here or there, it's really raw and visceral because it's as the events are actually unfolding each day, rather than like a biopic look back. I loved his humour, I loved the footnotes and all these little asides. It did make me cry at the end. It's very intense in places. Going off on, sticking with the medical theme actually, we've got The Butchering Art by Lindsay Fitzharris. This is a history book specifically looking at the history of Joseph Lister, who was the man who invented antiseptic. What I really love about this particular story is it's a brilliant way of giving a sweeping look at the history of medicine, but by focusing it in on just one individual and the inventor, we can get a lot more of those little touches that make it feel far more personal and involved for the reader. It is grisly, it is gruesome, of course, it's Victorian medicine. They did things in some really traumatic ways at times, and the author is not afraid to go into detail, so if you're a bit squeamish, I would avoid this one. Lindsay Fitzharris has a very gentle style, so it didn't feel bogged down with lots of facts. Another one that's definitely going to be good fun and was an easy read is Soccernomics by Simon Cooper and Stefan Szymanski. This is looking at the economics behind football, or soccer for you American folks out there. It's a look at some of the different interplaying factors of football outside of the game itself. If you are interested in things like, do managers genuinely make a difference? Why do footballers get paid so much? How do league systems work? There's why certain countries seem to always do better than others, and just all sorts of interesting information like that. I really liked it. I thought that it was a fascinating look at a world that I know very little about. It just generally had a lovely flow to it, and I found myself absolutely fascinated about a topic that, fundamentally I have very low interest levels in outside of some very specific contexts. So to bring football to life in this way for me, I think is very impressive for the author. And then a book that has been making waves and been on pretty much everybody's list for, I think, more 2017 than 2018 is Educated by Tara Westover. I listened to this on audiobook, which I would recommend as well. We love a good audiobook. It's a memoir of a woman who was part of a survivalist family, and it's about her struggle to leave them and find herself in education, and she ends up going to like Cambridge and Harvard and basically doing very well for herself. Now, from the outset, I thought this was going to be a bit more discussing education and kind of the pros and cons of a formal education versus a home education, whereas actually what I'd say going into it is it's more of a real intense look at her family and her family life and the abuse that she suffers. There are some very intense scenes with her families, especially with her brother and her dad, that were just emotional and harrowing, and I had no idea what I was walking into, but it was just so incredible. Like the number of times that I put this book down and was like, what? Like I don't use the phrase mind-blowing very often, but I think that this one literally blew my mind. So I would really recommend it. Now, I said I'd do 4, but I couldn't make this list without one honourable mention, and that is The Secret Barrister by Anonymous. Similar to the NHS book, this is a intense look at the justice system in the UK, but unlike the NHS book, this one is not in diary form. This is very much curated to give which is absolute wealth of information to the reader. This was originally a blog that has been turned into a book, but unlike most of those, it's done quite well. The just amount of information in here about how the justice system works in terms of like magistrates, courts and juries, and where's the burden of evidence on, and how do the evidence chains work, and just so much information, which is something that you really don't think about in day-to-day life, but actually touches on so many of us, because this is the kind of foundation that our society is built on. It was intense in the sense that you did have to be very awake to read it, because you are talking a lot of information in one go, but at no point did I feel bogged down by that, and a lot of the examples were really emotional and touching. So those are my top 4-ish for audiobooks and non-fiction. I hope that you are enjoying this series. I'm having great fun filming it, so who cares about you guys? I'm having a good time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. See you tomorrow. Bye guys.